The murder of a political influencer provoked a range of reactions, from grief to gallows humor. But it also demonstrated the power of social media to shape our conversations and, in some cases, even our perceptions. Here to talk about trying to restore civility to conversations both on and off campus, we're joined by Gabriel James, founder of the Pathway America chapter at Flagler College. Welcome back, Gabriel.
Hi, it's good to be back.
We're also joined by Zuzanna Pankowski, the group's strategic initiatives officer. Zuzanna, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Michael Binder, political science professor at the University of North Florida. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Elizabeth Andersen, chief executive officer at OneJax. Hi, Elizabeth.
Good morning.
So, Zuzanna, I want to start with you. You're also a student at Flagler College, in addition to your work with Pathways. What is the mood on campus? How have things been since this really shocking and tragic murder?
So I have to say, we've mostly witnessed students be very distraught by what happened. They're shocked that this kind of act can occur on a college campus. Personally, I've had conversations with students where they're kind of concerned to talk about how they're actually feeling about this situation because they don't know who they're going to be talking to and how that person is going to react to what they're saying. Which that's what we do at Pathway. We encourage to have those kinds of civil conversations, but it's been shocking to realize that people are scared to talk about how they're feeling. And I personally have not witnessed anybody speak negatively or promote what happened to the political figure Charlie Kirk. But Gabe did talk to a few students on campus a few days ago, and he definitely had some enlightening conversations.
Gabe, tell us about that.
So I stood on the Flagler College campus with a sign that suggested that we should not, political violence has no place in America. And
What did the sign say?
it says political violence has no place in America. And a lot of students were angry because they thought that this was a message solely for the death of Charlie Kirk. And I tried to emphasize to everybody that came and spoke to me that this is not just for Charlie Kirk, where everybody's sort of invigorated right now because Charlie Kirk, everyone sort of had this parasocial relationship with him through social media and whatnot, whether that's positive or negative. But this is also for the Minnesotan lawmakers who were murdered in the name of their political ideas. And students in schools have been murdered for religious or for political ideological reasons as well. And I think now is a good time to start really voicing our concerns about that from Pathway America.
And for people who, I mean, we've had you on to talk a little bit about political civility and difficult conversations on campus. What is Pathway, though? What is this organization? Because you previously were part of a group called the Political Forum at Flagler College.
So the Political Forum at Flagler College was just a student club. It still is a student club that sort of laid the framework for Pathway America. I founded the nonprofit organization Pathway America a year ago to try and expand the ideas of the political forum to campuses beyond Flagler in a much larger scope. So these are ideas of productive and free speech on college campuses, productive dialogue, depolarization, and responsible leadership in government. So these are the kind of ideas we're now we're now facilitating at the Political Forum, which is a chapter of Flagler College, of Pathway America. And we're trying to now open new chapters at other colleges around Florida that should be coming here soon, the next year or so.
So, Michael Binder, these are students at Flagler College. Obviously, you are at the University of North Florida. What have you been experiencing, both as a faculty member and somebody who's kind of interacting with students since this murder?
Honestly, not a ton. Sure, if you are steeped in this and you are maybe a member of Turning Point or the Socialist Club on campus or whatever it happens to be, like this is what you do day to day, it impacts you, et cetera. The vast majority of our students probably don't even know who the guy was, and that's something that I don't know that people in our world that do this for a living fully comprehend. Yes, a ton of people know who he was, but a ton of people don't. And 3 weeks from now, we're not going to be talking about this. And I think that's something that people are going to try that forget in the moment too.
I'm interested that you say that because I've seen a lot of people say this is the start of something, whether it is a more concerns about political violence increasing or just a rise in activism. Certainly there's been a spark of interest in Turning Point and a lot of people, expressing interest in starting chapters of that at schools around the country. I've seen reported. So, we all know that the news can change quickly. Um, but you don't believe that this is something that is a inflection point.
I don't. I'm not going to say that there's not going to be more political violence. Of course there is. It's part of our fabric of this society. We have ebbs and flows. But think about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, like where they almost got him. You know, it that was essentially forgotten a month later, and that you know we still think about of my generation, like we still think about Reagan getting shot and what that led to. I feel like that was more impactful than Trump, and it's the same exact circumstance. These are things that, because the news cycle is so quick and it will pass, something else will happen. Heck, Robert Redford died today. That's going to be the headline tonight on the news.
Elizabeth Anderson, I'm interested. I mean, your group is focused on having hard conversations and doing it right. What are you seeing in the wake of this killing that has you thinking about whether we are doing it right, whether people are approaching this in a way that's going to either assist the political environment or not?
Yeah, this season, we are doing our Breaking Bread and Barrier series, and we're talking about humanity in the age of information. In fact, tonight we'll be here at WJCT with our first program talking about social media and algorithms and the way that they are designed to divide us. And so as I listen to the students and I listen to Mike talk, there are whole groups of people that absolutely know who Charlie Kirk is, who absolutely believe that he was a hero. And then there are people who have no idea who he is because our feeds are curated to keep our attention. The way that information is designed to be fed to us is what it thinks we want to see. And so we are living in almost alternate realities
Mhm.
and trying to bring people together to have conversation with some common ground is becoming increasingly difficult. And unless we get together person to person, face to face, and try to have some of these hard conversations, it's only going to get worse.
I mean, it's interesting you say, the algorithm is designed to feed us what we're, interested in or attuned to, but it is also designed to agitate. We know that certain kinds of posts, certain kinds of information elicits much greater engagement, and that is what the platforms rely on for making money and growing. And so I would imagine that that's also something that you'll be talking about is the way that it's designed to foment conflict.
That's right. I mean, I think that's what clickbait is, right? So they want to know how long does it take before somebody clicks on the story? How long do they stay on the story? Are our eyes attuned to the story long enough? And those things that induce fear or rage or somehow salacious, those keep our attention longer, and our attention is a commodity. And if we are allowing our attention to be focused on things like political violence, then that's what we're going to get more of.
One of the issues that has emerged in the wake of this, in addition to a lot of political reaction, has been the actual firings of people, including teachers, many of whom were either seen as celebrating or being dismissive, I guess, of the impact of this death and the shooting. And so it's raised a lot of First Amendment concerns for some people. Obviously, there are different applications of the First Amendment depending on what kind of job you have. And so we know that, people who are in the field of education have been told that if their posts are, I think, disgusting is the word that the education commissioner of Florida used, that they'll be sanctioned. And the education commissioner is in a position to do that, to sanction teachers if he so chooses. So I'm wondering if that's something that you are also hearing about, discussed, and I guess blowback for people who have been commenting on social media in a way that some people think is inappropriate or not, not to the moment.
Well, what I like to say is we have freedom of speech in this country. We don't particularly have freedom from consequences. And if you decide to go on social media or to say in front of a classroom some very, you know, upsetting comments about the death of Charlie Kirk, or about political violence, condoning anything that might be seen as extremely offensive to some people, that you have the freedom to say that. You're not going to go to jail, but you can't be guaranteed that you're going to keep your job, especially in the private sector. But if someone was fired from Flagler College for saying something like that, it's a private institution, and that's just unfortunately how the game is played. You can lose your job for saying things if you aren't careful enough, and you shouldn't be arrested for for expressing your opinion, but there are consequences that come along with that.
Sure.
I think, real quick, though, I think some of the consternation about this, particularly the email sent to teachers in Florida this past week, is that they didn't get an email in June after Melissa Hortman was shot in Minnesota. And there was no warnings about people saying bad things about this and your job being in jeopardy. And the hypocrisy that is viewed in, I think, is causing a lot of skepticism with this just being about First Amendments and freedoms, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, certainly one of the things that complicates it as well is the fact that Charlie Kirk himself was known for saying some really inflammatory things. And, people have been discussing all of those things over the past week. And he's a podcaster. He was, very high profile as an influencer, and he had that role. But I think that one of the concerns that people have when they're being, or feel like they're being silenced, Zuzanna, is the fact that he had a role of a provocateur in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that is some of the conversations I've been having with people this week. I've had people come to me and ask, why do people care so much, or should I care so much? And I say, well, he was on the internet. His whole job was to basically, like you were saying, get those clicks in, get people. So I believe that he believed in what he was saying, but his job was also to kind of make it worse, or kind of make people get so sucked into it, So when they clicked on it, whether they didn't like him or they did, like Gabe was saying, they did form that parasocial relationship with it. And I think that is why we're seeing such a big wave of reaction from students our age, or like you mentioned, teachers have received emails. It's because of the reaction of the youth to it. Like, people are really reacting, and especially on the internet. So people are standing up for what they believe in, one way or the other, one extremity
Yeah.
or the other, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking about efforts to restore civility to political dialogue. And if you'd like to join our conversation, you can give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email First Coast Connect at wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. We've got a call from John in Riverside. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. What I want to say is that 70-plus million American voters put their seal of approval on political violence when they reelected Donald Trump after January 6th. Charlie Kirk enraged to engage. He was as provocative as he could. He finally provoked a response. He said things like, we should follow Leviticus and stone queers in the public square. I'm gay. He said that to the age group of people that are most likely to come after people like me in a group. He doesn't have a right. His free speech does not include the right to incite violence. And so any idea that we're going to discuss this calmly, when I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not going to get a gun. I don't want to leave my house every day prepared to kill somebody. But we're in the public square. If I want to wear a T-shirt expressing my political views, I'm going to be dealing with people with guns on their hips trying to intimidate me. Let me tell them right now, they didn't intimidate me when I came out as a gay person in the early 70s, and they're not going to intimidate me right now. I'm happy he's gone. He was trying to harm people like me, and now the flags are at half-mast, and his body is on Air Force Two. This is disgusting. This is fascism. If you don't like that word, take it up with Trump's largest serving chief of staff, his national security advisor, and Vice President Vance, all who called him a fascist.
John, thank you for your comments. Elizabeth, I think that, the passion there in John's voice and feeling targeted by the comments that Charlie Kirk would make about certain groups. He's speaking as a gay man, obviously felt that not only was his identity being attacked, but his safety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of people that feel exactly like John. Whatever their sort of identity or ideological perspective was diametrically opposed to what Charlie Kirk stood for. And so I think that what's important is that we remember that there are people on the other side of screens, on the other side of the keyboard. And so there are forces that certainly want to provoke us to act in ways that might hurt people. And I think it's up to all of us individually in our own sense of personhood and taking a sense of responsibility and agency for the way that we use our platforms, whether or not we want to follow the lead of people who would incite violence, of people who would ask us to harm our neighbors, or whether or not we want to use our platforms to try to understand, to try to listen, to try to build bridges, to try to help people realize that John is your neighbor, right? And that there's nothing inherently wrong with him as a person. He's not my neighbor, but I'm sure that John is, a fine neighbor to have. And so when we think about what it means to live in community, and sometimes I think we get too big, right? We think about what's happening in the world or what's happening in the country. But right here in Jacksonville, we have to try to make this work together, one person at a time.
Well, it's interesting because, 8 out of 10 people say, in polls, that they are friends with or family members of someone of a different political view. And so in our daily lives, we are interacting with people, very often people that we like a lot, that perhaps have a very different perspective on things. Why does it get so much more difficult for us to interact with strangers, for instance, on the internet who have those same views?
I think it's easy to hate an idea. It's easy to hate something that isn't a whole living, breathing human who's sitting right in front of you. And that's the importance of connection, right? That's the importance of coming together and telling your story, of letting people know, knowing yourself enough to be able to share yourself with other people. And the more afraid that we get to go out into public and to openly share who we are, what makes us us. I'm a dog lover, or I'm a Republican, or all the things that define how we want to be seen, how we want to show up in community. We're afraid to even share some of those things because we're not sure what response we're going to get from people. And that is going to keep us really siloed, really divided, and really polarized.
We've got a call from Mark on the South Side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I enjoy y'all's discussions because you go into depth on things. And whenever you see political violence, I certainly don't condone it. I don't condone the idiot that killed the Democrats up north. I don't condone the idiot that killed Charlie Kirk by any stretch. And I think if once you've reached that point, you have nothing to contribute to the dialogue of an issue. But after something like that happens, in my opinion, people are very quick in today's 24/7 news cycle to try and take a side, to find out what was the motivation behind something. And many times memes pop up, bits that are taken out of context pop up on our social media. News reporters, say things that really aren't factually true. And you just had a caller on there making a comment about how Kirk advocated stoning gays. That whole discussion was taken out of context, and in my understanding, the New York Times even had to retract their story and issue a correction because they were incorrect in attributing that to a thought that was Charlie Kirk's. So I use that as an example of how, and I guess I could be guilty of it as well, that you see something that you think is true and you believe it's true because it closely aligns with what you may perceive as truth inside your own self. So I would, encourage all of us, if something bothers you, if there's an issue that's important to you, then research it. Have good dialogue. Try and find out, what are the merits, the pros and cons of any given article. But to just accept a meme or something, or, even the New York Times having to issue a correction, you might look at the New York Times as a reputable journalistic magazine or newspaper, but they made a mistake. They were incorrect in their reporting. So I would just advise all of us, before you come to some knee-jerk reaction or response to an issue, investigate it for yourself.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mark. Thanks for your comments. We also have a call from Marie at the beaches. Good morning, Marie. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. So you may know that the Jacksonville Public Education Fund recently fired one of their employees, Leo Frith Thomas Jr., following his comments on social media after Charlie Kirk's death. As Gabriel pointed out, the Public Education Fund is a nonprofit organization. That's an example of a private entity that's entitled to their own hiring and firing decisions. But we are also seeing that the only reason why this came up was Councilmember Diamond called for this firing, and then I believe Council President Kevin Carrico is filing legislation to have Leo Frick Thomas Jr. removed from the Public Service Grants Council. So I would love the panel to weigh in on, if we're not talking about private institutions, we're talking about city government, where does the line of free speech come into play? Because Mr. Thomas's comments were not incitement, they were not inherently violent. We all know you can't yell, fire in a crowded theater. Some people may think that they're distasteful, and that's their opinion. But I'm confused because I've been told for the past 5 years that the liberals are the snowflakes. We're the ones doing cancel culture, and I'd love to hear what the panel has to say about what we're seeing regarding this legislation.
Thanks, Marie. Mike, I'm going to ask you to answer that, but also I just kind of want to inject into that. There was a Supreme Court case on this very issue in 1987 when a clerical worker in Texas who worked for a law enforcement agency said basically she was sorry that an assassin did not kill President Reagan, and she was fired. And her boss said, look, you're working for a law enforcement agency. You can't be advocating for the assassination of the president. But she won that case. The Supreme Court at the time said she had the right to make those comments as long as her comments didn't negatively impact her performance or the functioning of the office. And so to Marie's question, that line between, being dismissed for your comments or for your position on this incident, where is that line?
Well, I think there's two things to take into account here. One is lawsuits take time. And two is we are living in a very different legal structure than we were 40 years ago. And if anybody who studies courts in America and the behavior of justices, we are exceptionally polarized, and courts at all levels are particularly partisan, more so than they have been. And I would be skeptical if a case like that were decided similarly in this particular circumstance, if we get to that, because that takes years down the road.
What about Marie's question about the role of the city council in this?
And again, I'm curious what all of these city council members were saying when Paul Pelosi was attacked in his house just a couple of years prior. The hypocrisy on this is just stunning. Listen, 98% of the people in this country think political violence is bad and we shouldn't do it. But there are absolutely people who benefit from inciting people. And we've talked about this today. The more invested you are, the more scared you are, the more angry you are, the more likely you are to A, donate to a cause, B, knock on doors, or C, show up to vote. There are a lot of elected officials that benefit from this type of behavior among their base. And until that changes, until there are enough people that are willing to put aside their partisan hats and say, okay, I'm not going to vote on my partisan leanings, I'm going to vote on this particular issue, you're not going to see a change.
Gabe, you are going to have a meeting tomorrow night, just a regularly scheduled meeting. I'm curious what you're expecting to hear at that meeting from your members and other college students, and then just some of the events that you've got coming up that address issues of civility on campus.
Sure. So the chapter at Flagler College is meeting this week to talk about Charlie Kirk, to talk a little bit about their upcoming events. They really want to direct the conversation around free speech and how that may have been, how some people see it in jeopardy as it relates to the Charlie Kirk incident, or as the callers mentioned briefly, how does that play out in the public sector and the private sector, and is this hypocritical to fire people for promoting their beliefs in a public space or in a public industry? As it comes to our events, We have some really wonderful debates between teachers, capitalism, socialism debate coming up next week, moderated by a student to really demonstrate good debate for college students. We also have a Supreme Court scholar, political scientist from UMass Amherst coming this semester to discuss how the Supreme Court, a lot of the tensions in the Supreme Court could be resolved with bipartisan efforts. Next semester, we have probably one of the biggest speakers coming to Flagler ever, John Gable, the CEO of All Sides, the multimedia technologies platform that promotes unbiased reporting and media. So he'll be coming in the spring to talk about how media bias affects students on campus and how multi-partisan efforts can also advocate for better media, better, more productive dialogue within the media space.
Zuzanna, it's interesting to talk about having people model the correct way to do conversations. And I'm just curious what you would like to see from political leaders, from influencers, from people in a space where people are paying attention to what they have to say. What do you think would be helpful in this moment?
I really have always advocated for educating yourself before you speak. For a long time, I felt like I couldn't speak on something because I didn't know enough. And so, what that meant for me was that I took the extra step, learned a little more, read both sides of the story, and that kind of helped me and a lot of students. And that's what we try to teach at Pathway America is educate and then have those conversations with people that maybe don't believe in the same thing as you. And I think that's necessary to see in society and like our leaders, political leaders, education, and just don't immediately jump at people's opinions and throats and remember that that is a person that you're speaking to.
Yeah.
So,
Well, a good thought, Susanna. And of course, as we mentioned, there is an event tonight, Breaking Bread and Barriers. It's a OneJax event. It is designed to help us learn how to overcome some of the hostility and the nasty algorithms on social media. And that you can find more information at onejax.org. Elizabeth Andersen, Mike Binder, Gabe, Zuzanna, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Good conversation.
Thanks, Ann.
Thank you.